extremely exciting because I'm back. Yes, another Ask an Expert live stream. And as you can see, I'm joined today by Shashi Lo, which is very exciting because Shashi is a senior UI engineer with a huge wealth of experience in the tech industry. I was looking at your experience today, Shashi, stalking you on LinkedIn. And it seems that for over 15 years, you've been smashing it in the tech industry. You've done design, development, architecture, you've been a business owner, and of course now you're a senior UI engineer, which is super impressive. Looking forward to talking to you today because your passion, if I'm not mistaken, is helping people to break into tech. And you're going to help us with that today by talking all things UI. What is UI design? UI versus UX, design fundamentals. How do you know if you've got a good UI? Some current UI trends, what not to do. We've got it all. So yes, thank you for coming, Shashi, and stay tuned if you want to learn all about UI. Super excited to have you here, Shashi. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks for the intro as well. That was pretty epic right there. But yeah, I'm excited to be here as well. Thank you, Scrumba, for having me on here.
Yes. Very exciting. We get asked a lot of questions about UI over on Scrimba. As you can probably tell from all the excited comments, we've got, oh yeah, from Ryan. That's what I like to hear. Of course, if you have a UI question for Shashi, drop that into the chat. I'm always looking for awesome questions to ask. But let's get started, Shashi, with what is UI design?
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
No problem.
What is UI design? What is UI design? What UI stands for user interaction. Therefore, the UI design consists of animations, click actions, screen layout, transitions, all that within a website or an application. It's basically the visual representation and interaction of a project or an application. So, it sometimes goes, you hear it hand in hand with UX as well. And that's why you hear UX UI. It's very hard to decipher between the two. I think people can say they're the same, they're different. But that's my interpretation of UI design.
That is very cool to hear. Quick question from Cooley. How to be a UI engineer? Maybe the first question I should ask is, what is a UI engineer? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so UI engineer is basically the bridge between design and development. You have, obviously designers, they come up with mockups, components, and features. And then you are that person to work with them to understand that design and to implement that into your product or into the website. Because, there's a lot of roles in development, and sometimes you need the specialist to be able to work really well with design. And so this UI engineer will take that and understand development, and taking that design can implement it well into the application itself. And so how do you become a UI engineer? Oh, that's a tough one because it could be many things, but I would say you just have to really enjoy implementation, because there's two facets, right? There's the facet of design, the front of the front, and then there's a facet of more of a functional programmer where you're building components, you're building the structure and all these things. So I see it as like kind of two spectrums, but a UI engineer is very vital to any team.
That is interesting. I'm interested how you became a UI engineer, because as I mentioned at the start, you've had a wealth of experience from development, design, you've been a business owner and all sorts. What was your path to UI like? And what was it that attracted you to the UI field?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I started 15 years ago, which sounds like a long time ago. And back then, there was not even front end development. It was just either you're a web designer or a developer. And I was both. I was like, I'm this unicorn and I don't know what to call myself. I'll just call myself web designer developer, and then I'll move forward with that. And then the front end development title came out, and I was like, oh, that's what I am. I'm a
Mm.
front end developer because I love to implement design. I love to also continue to work in design a little bit, but I love to make those things come to life. And as my career evolved, that was my passion. My passion was, hey, I want to help the user understand and get through this application or this website much easier, for them to understand it, for them to basically have less clicks to get to where they need to, because I really care for the user and where they're going. And so as my career progressed, UI became bigger, and then I was like, you know what, like that's kind of where I want to go, because the UI encompasses all of that, and more so from a software standpoint. And so now I'm able to work in a software cycle, doing agile, doing sprints, working with team members really closely. And so I'm kind of doing what I used to do, but just placed inside the software cycle. And so that's where I kind of feel like UI engineering is evolved into, is basically a front end developer, but placed into the software cycle.
Very nice. Question from Amy, which I've been wondering about as well. Can or should devs learn UI?
That's almost the same question as, should every developer learn design, right? Because
Mm.
UI encompasses design. And I would say to understand the basics is really good, but to really like deep dive and be really good at UI, I would say no, because it takes a different discipline to be a UI engineer, or to even be a front end developer. You have to really have that sense of what good design is, understanding kind of the concepts and the orchestration of like these layouts and these components. Because when I'm working with designer, not every designer like builds the world's greatest or most usable design, right? Like their
Mm.
layouts sometimes could be out of this world, and I'm like, hey, hold on, can we rethink this? Like, we have a component library, or our development, our code base has this already. Can we just reuse this so that it saves us time? And so you're gonna have to like work hand in hand with them. And then also at the same time, a lot of designs that you receive, you don't have any interaction. It's in that mock, right? It's just a static mock. And so if you don't have any of that, then you as the UI engineer, you are going to come up with that. Like, what's the transition look like? Where's the click events? Like, how are these things going to be constructed? And then also and also the responsiveness too. Most of the times they'll give you a mobile and a desktop screen, and then you don't have a tablet design. So now there's all these in betweens that you have to decipher between, like, how am I going to break this down according to this screen size? How am I going to do it for that? So there's a ton involved, and that's why I say it's good to have UI engineers or people that are focused and love being a little part of design, because as a developer or engineer, there's just too much to learn. Like, you're already learning
Mm.
how to like connect the APIs and do other stuff. Like, learning design is like a completely different discipline.
That is interesting. So, if I've understood it correctly, you've got your design, which comes from your designer, which
Mhm.
sometimes it might look amazing, but the usability of it is the issue. And it's your job to kind of balance that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah. Basically, your job is to have a second pair of eyes on it, right? To ensure to walk them through this, to go through the design, because a static design can mean so many things, right? Like, it can do so many things, like a button click and show rainbows, or what is it
Mhm.
supposed to do, right? Like, that's the thing
Yeah.
that I have constant communication with my UX designers and product as well, to understand. Okay, I see this, but I'm going. Is this the correct functionality that we're looking for, or are we looking for something else? Because we have this functionality already. I can put it in; it might look good. Or are you envisioning something different? And when you spark those conversations, sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's like, oh no, like I was envisioning that it would be this way instead of what we have. Then it's like, okay, I understand what you're looking for. I can go and implement that.
Yeah, cool. This brings us on to a nice question from Joel. How do you come up with UI design? Do you always need to see other designs for inspiration? Where do your ideas come from, I guess?
Oh, I think we're jumping the gun here. These are good questions. For me, at the beginning, I thought I was a really good designer. Like for real. Like I thought like, oh, I actually can, my design looks pretty good compared to all these corporate sites, but it wasn't. It wasn't near that. And what I really needed was inspiration. And I don't know if do we want to show one of my inspirations now or
Yeah, which one?
we can go to Dribble. So when I am tasked to come up with like designs or sometimes I'll do some volunteer work. Right now I do volunteer work for one of my church organizations and I'm building the website. So what I'll do is I'll go to here and I'll click on like web design, one of the tags up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you logged in, then you can search by what you're looking for, and it'll filter by these websites. And this is one of my favorite inspirational sites because these designers, not everybody can come into the site. You have to be invited to actually have an account in the site. So these designers, they're top notch. And when you're going through them, you'll see a ton of really creative and really modern designs. And what I'll do is I'll say, okay, so you see that top left one, I like that font. But you see the second one or the last one to the right on the second row, I like that look and feel. And then the second one column, the green one, I like that those buttons, right? So I'll take those kind of ideas and I'll mesh them together to create my own design because I don't want to take the full design because sometimes depending on what the client's looking for, depending on what the team is looking for, I have to come up with something more unique. So these inspirations help me because, as you can see, they're laid out very well. They look beautiful. And to take those ideas and mesh them together, I know that I'll come up with a more solid solution. And so that's how I would come up with design. And inspiration means everything. This is just one site. There's so many other out there, but definitely like pick and choose like items you like. What I usually like to do is I'll sketch it out. I'll find the idea I like. I'll sketch it out. I'll draw it out, just a quick like wireframe or design, and then I'll look at it. I'll be like, this looks good, right? And then I'll go in to like Sketch or Figma, and then kind of do a quick design or mock-up. Or if not, sometimes people are not really good at these applications, and you can go straight into development just to kind of get a quick prototype up.
Wow. So when you say sketch up, do you mean literally pen and paper type of sketch?
Yes, pen and paper sketch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting to know. And we also get that question a lot of if you need to know Figma or you can just start with development. So it's interesting to hear you say that you can go straight there if you're finding Figma to be a bit of a roadblock.
Yeah, because I know it's the same question as before where we're not all designers, right? Like some of us can't design. We can sketch, and then when we go into this like Figma or Sketch, the application, we don't know how to use them, or we don't know how to create a gradient or whatever it is. And it's like, but I know how to do it in CSS. So if you have a designer you're working with, then definitely get a design and get it mocked up. But if you don't, it's like, well, we can just skip the gun and kind of get a prototype up so we can kind of see what it looks like.
Yeah, work with what you've got. And I've dropped the Dribble link there in the chat, so you can all have a look at that. Question from Abhishek, which is very interesting, actually. How much of UI is art? What's your take on that, Shashi?
My take on it is, I think everything in life is art, because when you look at it, when you take a step back and realize like how things are constructed and how they're organized, that's art. Like you're putting things together, pieces together to come up and compose something, right? And UI is pretty similar, where you understand some key concepts, you understand like how it needs to be organized, and you're putting these things together. And so in reality, I feel like mostly everything in our life is art. even your daily schedule. You have to organize that, right? Like it may not look like art, but you still have to construct and put it together. And I feel like UI is a piece of art. One really big hobby of mine is smoking barbecue. And when I got into it, I was like, it's just cooking food, right? But no, there's like you have to
Hmm.
get it at the right temperature, you have to take it out the right temp, you have to wrap it up, you have to do this and that. If you're like one temperature too late, one temp too early, it kind of ruins the meat. And I was thinking, this is art. This is food art. Like this everything we kind of do, it encompasses art.
Yeah, that's a very good example, actually. And I was going to say that baking cookies can be an art form as well. Not that I do that, but yeah, totally hear what you're saying, that basically anything in life is art. So I hope that answers your question. Habish Kek. On to the maybe downside, maybe not. Arismas is asking, what's the hardest thing about UI? And then, slightly separate question, do you keep in mind the user's age when you build the UI? And if so, how do you determine that?
So what is the hardest thing about UI? I think the hardest thing about UI is trying to please everyone, right? Because your audience, unless if you do some research or you use Google Analytics to kind of gauge who your audience is or where they come from, it's really hard to be like, oh, this is my audience, or hey, let's just cover everybody. Let's just make this design so that everybody enjoys it. That's impossible because we all have a different way of thinking. We all have different likes. We all enjoy different things. And so, to the second question is, do you keep a user's age in mind? Yes, because depending on your product, your age group, right? Like your target audience is a certain group. Like if it's a mobile app for, let's say, a health app for elders, like you already know your age group is gonna be, more of the older age, and so you have to gauge your design according to them. You can't put a lot of bells and whistles there, not because they can't utilize it, but they just want to get there quick. They just want to get it done. And then if you're coming up with, let's say, some VR or some virtual reality things, your target audience will be younger. And so now you can put some more bells and whistles in and put some creativity in there because that's your target audience. So understanding that has been really interesting and really difficult for me, because at the beginning I didn't care about that. But then as you get more seasoned in your career, you need to care about that because you need to be targeted towards your audience, and to have the understanding of what you're building for and who the target audience is, that makes a big difference.
So it's, if I've understood correctly, not just the age, which you probably know, but maybe also what you're doing. Like, for example, if it's something that someone has to do, let's say the census, for example, you might want to make that as simple as possible. Whereas if it's something else, which is more optional, more fun, for example, you can make it a bit more convoluted. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Carla is a front-end developer, but trying to take on some design work. What steps would you recommend to join these two areas?
Oh, a front-end developer currently and trying to take on some design work. What steps would you recommend to join these two areas? This one is, it kind of goes hand in hand, because like at one one reality is you're not both, because it's tough to be like really good at both of these. But because you want to go into design more, like one of the best things is to find inspiration like Dribble or these other sites, right? Because as a developer, sometimes we are not, like when you're ingrained in something every single day and you do it every minute of your life, you're going to be really good at it, right? But then when you're not, then you don't have that drive and you don't have that knowledge to be really good at that one thing. So it feels like, right, like at this point is, she's really good at she's a front end dev and wants to get into design. So like finding inspiration to help balance the gaps in your design skills would be great, because then you can start to like implement and see good design. because that's how I got better as an implementer and designer too. Is just looking at these really really high quality designs and trying to mimic them and trying to put them in. And then another aspect was to be very particular with my code when I implemented it. It was like pixel perfect as much as possible, because when you start to develop that way, you start to see yourself like create this piece of art, right? You start to see the balance. You start to see just, oh, I'm not the world's greatest designer, but I can see that I can, put things together and it still looks really great.
Nice. Yeah. One question caught my eye here from Vid300. There are UI components that are geared towards dev, like Tailwind and ChakraUI. I haven't heard of ChakraUI, but I know what Tailwind is. Basically, it's a lot of pre-made components. Yeah. And there are other kits available. So do devs need to learn UI with this trend? So because we got Tailwind, do we need to learn UI on our own, basically?
This question is kind of like some of the other similar questions too. I would say understanding the basics is going to be good, because like a Tailwind or Chakra, like these, they're fully fledged or fully built out UI component libraries where you can just utilize their classes and their utility classes, and you can construct things and build them really quickly. And that's the benefit of these basically these design systems, is because you don't have to come up with them yourself. But there are going to be times where you may need to tweak something and you may need to understand why something is working. Because if you don't understand the why, then you won't understand how to make it better, right? Because I feel like I don't use Tailwind or Chakra right now. I want to get into them and kind of see like what they're all about. I've used other component libraries before, like Material UI. I've used Bootstrap. I've used Ant Design. Like these things help as well. But understanding the fundamentals of like CSS and like how to construct these things, it helps. It goes a long way. And it's true. These component libraries are being used in a lot of companies, and it's kind of eliminating, I would say, the UX engineer role, which that role is more design focused. And they focus more on implementing design, creating components, creating custom CSS files, and all that all together. And so, in one realm, like if you work with Tailwind or Chakra and that's all you're gonna do, then it's you're just gonna continue to learn that. But in another spectrum, if you go and work in a project that doesn't use these at all, then what are you going to do, right? Because then you don't have that discipline or the fundamentals to understand, oh, I don't know how to do this particular item in CSS Flexbox or Grid. I know how to do it in Tailwind, but then you don't have those utility classes available to you. So if you want to go down that route, I would say like that's fine, because the industry is going down that way. But the fundamentals are always key in anything in programming. Once you start to have the fundamentals, then you can spread your wings and go to multiple different projects, the different component libraries, and you can catch on really quickly.
Yeah, and I suppose if you have the fundamentals down, you have so much more choice of where you can go. Whereas if you're only doing Tailwind, then you're very limited to that. So, yes. Let's talk a bit about UI design fundamentals. Now, this is a fairly big topic, and we actually have an entire course on it on Scrimba. Here it is on the screen now. Yeah, with Gary Simon. So if you want to learn what they are, for free, no less, go and check that out. But Shashi, can you tell us your take on UI design fundamentals? And if we had to take away some fundamentals from this session, what should they be?
Yeah, I would say definitely a fundamental of UI is a component library. Like we were talking about, like Tailwind, Chakra. Like to build one of those or to have one of those is very fundamental, because then you have a style guide. Every team or individual, if you don't have a style guide, then your entire application or project is going to be lost, because then you won't have consistency. That is one huge key thing to like having UI design fundamentals is consistency. Because if you have multiple typography, multiple styles of buttons, and the users in there, and they're like, I I'm completely lost. Like, what's a primary action item? What's a secondary? What's a tertiary? I have no idea. They're all over the place. When you bring that balance together and the consistency, then it looks more professional. Then the user starts to trust your site more. And then also just picking really good typography, right? I know this is a really tough one because there's so many options out there, but to choose good typography that matches your style and branding. And then I had a quick example that I wanted to show everybody. Can you click on the CodePen link? It goes kind of in hand with this because it kind of plays tricks with your eyes, right? So right now at the top, you see where the border is, that shadow. Like for me, right, for my eyes, the top is white and the bottom box is a little bit light gray. Is that kind of what you see too, Leanne?
Yeah, now you mention it.
Yeah. And then can you make this window a little smaller? Yeah, I'll make that a little smaller. Yep. See, so now you can clearly see, right? Like the top is white and the bottom is light gray. Okay. And so now can you comment out line 8? That's what the box shadow is. So now, as this reloads,
yeah, have to sign in. One moment. This.
Hopefully this.
I think I'm in GitHub. This shows how long it's been. Here we go. Okay. Right,
Okay,
so commenting out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you can see, actually, it's pure white. There's no gray background there, and that's because our eyes, it plays tricks on us. Because if you put it back, right, what our eye does is it sees the shadow and then it blends in that gray into the white. And I had this problem so many times with designs. I'm like, is that white or is that gray? Like they're both together, and then I would have to inspect it. I'm like, oh, it's white. And so this is what I'm talking about. Like for the fundamentals, it's like there's ways for a designer to kind of utilize these tricks to help the user. And by doing that, it helps the user and directs the user to where you want to go. And so that was just a quick example I wanted to show of this.
Nice. That actually brings me nicely onto a question from Sponduli. What dev tools do you use to check to make sure that your animations, JPEGs, all other UI elements are not impeding performance or increasing loading times? I would actually like to expand this. How do you use dev tools to make sure that your UI is working? Or indeed, do you use dev tools for that?
Yeah, definitely. I use Chrome as my browser, so I use the dev tools there. When you're using it, where is it? Sure. There are options, right, for performance, and then you can also see all the where's the network tab where it loads like all of your assets, and you can kind of see what's taking long and what's not taking long. And then at that front too, you can utilize the tool they have built into Chrome called Lighthouse. And once you run that, Lighthouse will check the performance on your site on that page, on that particular page. Oh, great. Awesome. Let's do that.
Here we are, Lighthouse.
Yep. So if you generate that, then, and then go on the bottom, click on performance. Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. I hope I'm not going to dribble in it here. Here we are.
We'll see.
Lighthouse is warming up.
But this is definitely one of the best ways to check for performance. And, with images and assets, like there's, I don't know, it's tough to gauge like, whoa, that's a great score.
Yeah.
Usually websites are like 50s or 60s, right? But if they really fine tune their site, then it's really high like this. But yeah, one of the key things like with images is ensuring they're compressed. I use a tool. Once I compress my images down to JPEG, like 80% or so, there are metadata behind that JPEG. So I use a tool called tinypng.com. I take all my assets and I throw it in there. And what it does is it removes the metadata from your image asset, which saves you about 20% in image file space. So you think about it, you have 100 files, right? And it's going to save you 20%. That's a huge difference in performance. And then
Yeah.
also, like with Lighthouse, they will tell you like what you can do to optimize your site. And then at the same time, like you know, if you can, like, use lazy loading on your assets too, because then it's going to help while the user scrolls down to that section, then it will load up the image. Because on your first load, it needs to be optimal, it needs to be fast, because not everybody is going to be on a fast internet connection. And especially when you're on your phone, right? When you're on your phone, you may be in a spotty area, but you want to go purchase something, or you want to go look at somebody's article. And if that site is not optimized, it's not going to come up, and you might be like, oh, I'm out of here, like this is too slow. Even though the user didn't understand that it was their internet connection, they thought it was your website. So that's where
Mm.
the concept of mobile first development comes in, is to make sure that on a mobile device it has like no media queries, image assets are very compressed, things are just loading super fast. Because I don't know if you know, but Google page ranking and stuff like that, they take your page rank off of your mobile score, not your desktop score. So whatever
Really?
your score is on mobile, that is what they're going to kind of weight you on when they're ranking you for keyword searching and stuff like that. I didn't
Oh,
realize that until I read a couple articles, but I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because if your site's not optimized for mobile, then they're going to kind of dock you down.
yeah. And you can actually find out how your site loads on mobile and also across different speeds.
Mhm.
I think, is this it? Yeah. So if you go onto this mobile, what do you call it?
The tool.
Button. Yeah, exactly. And then you can choose if you're offline, how it's going to load. Well, presumably it won't load offline. But if you're on a low end mobile, what it looks like. Basically, it will show you what loads first. So that's very interesting. So you can go and check that out in the old DevTools. Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah,
Shashi.
DevTools is awesome. I use it all the time when I'm trying to optimize a site. And you'd be surprised what you can do when you run a Lighthouse, and then it gives you some key items to change. And as you're fine tuning things, you start to really understand, like, oh, this is how to optimize a site, but also to be a better engineer or developer too, is understanding like, oh, this is what I need to do. So the next time I can just do that without even thinking.
Yeah. Super cool. Javier is wondering, how do you stay updated of trends and how do you know which trends to hop onto? Indeed, do you go with trends or do you tend to avoid them? What's your approach with this, Shashi?
My approach to this is the same thing in life. I don't jump on trends right away, because sometimes they will fade away, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and that's why I don't hop on them right away, even though they're the coolest item on the block. I'm like, let's see how this plays out, because to
Mm.
learn this new trend or to implement this new trend, it may not be useful. I want to. I'm a data driven person, where I'm going to build something according to analytics. I'm going to build something that works for my users. I'm going to continue to go down the path of of what works and what's working for the target audience. And so, staying up with trends, like, there's a lot of websites out there. Expansion Magazine always has like good trends out there. Like Dribble, like all these designers, like they follow trends already. So when I go on there, there's always new designs on there to help me gauge like what's going on, what's not. Um, and then also just on Twitter, right? Like people are posting stuff all the time, and there's a lot of cool stuff on there. I know Jay, the developer with the backwards hat with the teddy bear, he
Yeah.
he always posts up stuff like with green sock, and all these cool animations. Like he's the guy I follow for like these trends. I'm like, dude, like you are my resource. Like like because I don't have the time and luxury to do that. So following people that can do that, and Kevin Powell, I love Kevin Powell because he's able to do stuff that I don't have time for. He's able to introduce us to cool new CSS techniques or properties. There's Jay. Jay's gonna love me for this. Okay.
Yeah.
But like
That's
following these
cool.
people, right? They basically have the capability and the time to go and try these new things or to follow trends. And Kevin has some amazing YouTube videos on just new technology that come out with CSS. And so I was telling him, I was like, I'm so glad that we have somebody like you because I don't have time to play around with these cool new things. But because you can, then I can see how I can implement them into my projects because I don't have the luxury to be like, oh, hey, I'm going to play around with this new technology and see if it works, right? I can't do that. I have to make it work. I don't have time to play around to ensure that it may work or may not work. And so to have people like these two guys, it's amazing because that is basically who I follow, and I follow other people too to find, look at resources and see what's going on in the industry. So definitely follow people that you look up to, follow people that are putting out really cool stuff because you're going to learn a lot from them as well.
Yeah, perfect. Asif is wondering, what are the main areas to focus on with UI? Given some examples like clicks, aesthetics, navigation, buttons, etc., compared to the UX flow. I'm not sure what that is, but let's focus on what are your main areas that you focus on in UI.
The main areas I focus on are definitely aesthetics because with aesthetics comes organization. With organization comes like button, navigation, all that stuff, right? So it's kind of like a layered effect where you have to look at what you have at hand first. Like, what is the feature itself? How is this going to be laid out? And how is this going to aesthetically look good to the user? If it's a hero, then do we have a primary action? Do we need a secondary action? And then if it's a brand new site, right, with navigation, where we're going to put that navigation is an e-commerce site where we have to put shopping cart, login, all that jazz. So there's a lot in play there. But I would say that my focus is always like ensuring that things that are being placed are placed in like user friendly areas. Per se, I've seen a lot of sites, like a lot of desktop sites, go right away to the hamburger menu. It makes sense for certain sites that are like more creative and you just want the user to flow through your site, right? But like, let's say an e-commerce site, that does not make sense at all because you want to allow your user to jump around to sections. You want them to go to the cart right away. To have them use one of their clicks to go and click on the menu, you're kind of forcing them to do one more thing that they don't want to do. You only have a matter of seconds or maybe minutes, maybe not minutes, seconds to kind of engage the user. And if you don't, then they might leave, right? And that goes a long way, is trying to entice the user to stay, trying to get the user to where they want to go to faster.
Awesome. Yes, hope that answers your question. Asif, I would like to talk a little bit about some common UI mistakes. We have all been on infuriating websites. I won't name any names, but we all know what they're like. But we might not necessarily know what it is that makes them infuriating. Can you shed some light on this, Shashi?
So some common UI mistakes. So the common ones that I've identified are just not having like styles, like consistency again, not having consistent styles for your buttons or your typography, right? Like that goes a long way because you can see right away, like, oh, they care for their website or they care for the user by implementing good design or balance. I'm going to say balance a lot. And then also the second point is not having the proper balance in sections. I've seen some where they have a content piece at the top. There's like 20 margin at the top, but there's like 100 at the bottom. So now it's imbalanced. And to the eye, that is not as pleasing, right? So when you have that balance, then it's more pleasing to the eye. And then the third one I have is just poor usage of typography. Typography is so difficult to come up with, like good typography. at most, and combining typography. It's like when you have a combination of different fonts, like what works well with what, right? Like it's so difficult to know and to understand that. And that's again where I go to in my inspirations to say, oh, hey, let me see how they've used it here. And that way I can find that balance, because if it looks good, really good here, and they're using it here as well, and they're a really good designer, that must mean that this combination works pretty well. A huge item that I've seen in a lot of portfolios that I've reviewed is no hover states, because hover states on action items, those signify to the user that they can do something, right? And if you don't have that, or even the cursor, right? Just the pointer, the cursor pointer, not having that will not let the user know that they can actually do something. And these are things that little cues that we can do to help guide the user to where we want them to go or where they want to go. And then another big item that I see in a lot of even some big websites too is just the area where you click on like a menu item or a button. Sometimes a lot of people will build these actionable items, and the only thing you can click on is the text and not the whole like element itself. And so
Yeah.
that makes it really difficult. Like I click on, it, I'm like, it's not doing anything. It's a button, and then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta click on the text. Well, that's not gonna help me. And this goes really hand in hand with mobile, because a lot of mobile sites they do that, and it's really hard. Like what they call fat finger, right? Like if you click on the area and it doesn't work, then the user thinks, oh, this is broken. But that's where you expand the clickable region to the second element, and it makes it a lot easier for the user. And one item that I had on here is a link that I wanted to show, which is carousels.
Oh,
In
yes.
carousels,
I enjoyed this
like,
one. But
if you go
give
back,
it. Yes.
should
Here
I
we
use a
are.
carousel? No, seriously, why
Oops.
not? So yeah, so we can post this link up for you guys to look at. But the whole idea behind this is carousels are really cool. They showcase a lot of sections in just a little tight area, but in reality, how often have you yourself used a carousel, right? Like when you see a web
Hmm.
and you don't really care about it, and you go and you see this carousel, are you filtering through the carousel? Probably not. And so same thing will go for your site and your application is, unless if it makes a lot of sense, nobody's really going to use it. So you're wasting time, and you're wasting an area where instead, if you have three sections, you can just stack it, right? So the user can see all three of them at the same time. Plus, for accessibility purposes,
Hmm.
carousels are really bad. And so by stacking them, now the user is forced to see all three sections. Then it makes sense. And so that's where that's like one common UI mistake that I see a lot. Sometimes it works, but oftentimes it's not a good idea. It's just not. It's a space that could be utilized much better.
So if you're thinking of using a carousel, think twice, basically.
Let's
Oh.
see.
Debbie was going to add a carousel to her portfolio and has switched it to a video. So there you go.
That
Perfect.
is perfect, Debbie. That's a perfect example of swapping it out, because then like a animated GIF or like a video, then it all it just plays itself and it works, right? It doesn't force the user to click. Or right now, this is an automatic carousel, but even then, like it just I'm not a fan of carousels much anymore.
No, me neither. And I feel like if they're not automatic, you're banking on the user wanting to click and actually clicking. And if they
Yeah,
are automatic, you're never going to get the speed right for everyone and for every slide that you've got. So basically, they're a
100%.
disaster waiting to happen. Yes. Debbie's comment has led me on nicely to our next topic, which is portfolio specific UI. Now, you have spent many, many hours doing portfolio reviews, which we'll talk about in a minute. But can you tell us a bit about how to create a nice UI for a web development portfolio?
Yeah, I think this is a really tough one, because especially for aspiring developers and junior developers, because you only know so much, right? And a lot of developers' main focus is development, not design. And so that's
Mm.
where trouble has come in a lot of the portfolios that I've seen is, we're not all built to be designers, and that's okay. But the understanding of design will come later. Right now, you're jamming in all this coding and all these development aspects and understanding these concepts. And that's what your focus should be, because when you get on the job, you're not going to be tasked to design much of anything. You're actually going to be handed designs, or maybe you'll do a little bit design, but that's not going to be your main objective. And so to put together a good portfolio, I would say, the same thing as we've been talking about too in the past, in a lot of these other questions, is inspiration, right? Finding inspiration to look at and to kind of pick ideas off of, and to create these more uniformed UI, more so like your own UI. And how do you know if it's going to be good? Well, you can always come to me for a portfolio review. I'm
Yes.
very honest with those, and
Right. Well,
I try to do my best job at being honest, because there are often times where I see a portfolio and it is not the best, and that's okay, because I understand that you're still learning and you're still grasping. So what I try to guide you to do is to go and utilize some like front end mentor challenges, or to go get some inspiration to build these things, because you if you want to build your own portfolio, it's got to be pleasing. You have just a matter of seconds, like maybe less than 5 seconds, to really please somebody when they land on your site. And then just a quick plug there, I'm wearing this shirt because I'm supported by Pastel. Pastel was kind enough to support
ooh,
me in these portfolio review Fridays. And if you don't know about Pastel, Pastel it's a fantastic application. I've used it for about a year now or so, off and on. But they allow you the ability to go right onto a live website and create comments on there, suggestions on there right away. And it's amazing, because before, what I had to do was screenshot a design, put it into Photoshop or something, put my comments there, or put it into like InVision, or it's these, like a PDF document, and it didn't make sense. Like, you couldn't really track these things. But with Pastel, it does that for you, and then your team can track all these issues and these comments. There's like progress statuses that you can move them into, and your team can collaborate and really just get down to nitty gritty of these things. And I really enjoy that it has a mobile view too, where you can shrink it down, and then now when you put the comments into that mobile view, when you click on that comment, it goes directly to that view, to that section, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so that's why I really felt like this was a great partnership, because now I just use Pastel to do these reviews, and it's helped me so much to kind of be more specific about portfolio reviews, because there are certain items where I'm like, that button below that title, below
mm,
that content, below this, it's so you don't know what I'm talking about. But here I can just click on the exact element or the exact piece that I'm talking about, and that comment will be targeted exactly to that section. And it makes it so easy to just understand the comment I'm talking about, or for you to understand what is needed at hand.
yeah. So you can get your portfolio reviewed by Shashi using Use Pastel. And then in your first developer job, you can suggest this to your team as a way of closing that feedback loop between this rather stressed out designer, hope he's okay, to the client, the developer, and everyone. So yeah, it's definitely a great tip there. Thank you for that, Shashi. Speaking of this collaboration, Max Davis is wondering what the collaboration between developers and UI engineers actually looks like.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Max. The collaboration is very hands-on. When I get a design, I'll go to the designer. If I have questions, right, I'll set up a meeting and go to them and say, hey, like, these are the items I want to go through. Let's talk about the interaction between this, right? What were you envisioning for the user when they got here? And when I click on this menu item or this link, like, how is it going to look like? Because it matters how it looks like, it matters how it transitions. It just every little aspect of that matters, right? So it's very hands-on where we talk about design at that point, not even development. I don't even mention development to them because I don't want to introduce them to something that they might not understand. All I would tell them is, oh, in our component library or in our styles, we have this transition already. Can we just utilize that? Or did you envision something different? So kind of educating them at the same time, right? But then also um, like getting more details about a certain design or feature that they've implemented, because as implementers, like it's tough to sometimes translate what they're trying to get at. And so to have these meetings are very vital, because then all the questions that you have may be answered. And sometimes you bring up some ideas to them, or some element that is in question, and they're like, you know what, that you're right, or maybe I should have done this differently. I didn't have somebody else to come and like help me understand what I was designing. So we can restructure this so it makes sense for development. And when you help and when you have these conversations with the UX designers too, they become like your partner. They understand, like, I want to make this easier for you and you want to make this easier for me. Let's come to common ground so that we can implement this in a timely manner, and as well as not go crazy and building a thing that's going to take weeks or just more time to do. Let's try to utilize what we have, but sprinkle some new stuff in there so that we can utilize them in other sections as well.
Sounds great. Anyone wanting to learn about UI can come on to Scrimba. I have a quick course from Gary Simon that I mentioned earlier. And we also have a boot camp, which is several hours. Can't remember offhand how many. 12? Anyway, many hours of UI tuition. But I was wondering, Shashi, if you have any other resources you would like to share.
The one that I mentioned was Frontend Mentor. I worked on this one last year, and I've been in constant contact with the owner, Matt, and just understanding what they're doing and all the things that are coming. The reason why I really, really push people to Frontend Mentor is because their challenges, if you go to their challenges, they have like industry standard designs. Their designs are really good and challenging. At the same time, they're organized by levels, right? Easy, intermediate, expert. And the coolest thing is, if you go into them, there are other people that have submitted these solutions already. So if you don't want to build this from scratch, you can go and review other people's implementations to learn from them. And if you get in trouble, or like if you're like building it, you're like, oh, I don't know how to do this. All these people, they post their implementations on GitHub, and you can go review the code. Like, you can actually see it and it's working. And then people will provide feedback for you within the site as well. So that's one thing that I really, really like, is that the designs are industry standard. If you get stuck, you have resources to go to and look and like kind of see what other people's implementations look like, what their code looks like, and you can get a really good gauge of where you're at or where you want to go, right? Because one of the best things for you as a developer is to learn from other people's code, right? And if you're building the same exact thing and you have hundreds of these solutions, you have 100 resources to go to and to be like, hey, how did they do this? Oh, I like how they did that. That makes sense, right? And so you start to confine it and find these little snippets of code or snippets of implementation and be like, hey, I want to do that in my next project. And so that's like one quick way to kind of upgrade your toolbox and your development career. So yeah, Frontend Mentor has been fantastic. They have a great community. They have a Slack channel as well, where you can go on and talk to all these other people on there. There's like 100,000 people on their Slack, which is crazy. And so this is probably my number one resource for anybody that wants to learn UI engineering or design, because this is basically what you're going to do on the job. Is you're given a design or some specs, and you have to build it, and you have to put it together, and then you have to do it well. And I think the biggest thing is, and you have to try to be pixel perfect, right? That word, pixel perfect, is very, very difficult to achieve, but that's what we strive for. That's what I strive for, is to be as pixel perfect as I can when working with designers and getting designs, because that is their bread and butter. They took a ton of time to research this design to give it to you. It's your job to bring it to life, to communicate that with them. And so that's why I'm in constant communication with my designers as well, to ensure that this is exactly what they were looking for and envisioning, because it is tasked on me to bring their design to life.
Perfect. Absolutely true what you're saying about bringing designs to life there. And I'm glad you mentioned Front-End Mentor, because if you haven't heard, we have a course on Scrimba where we've teamed up with them. Yes. And Kevin Powell. I mean, that's a triple whammy, isn't it? Yeah. So what it is we have this design here about space travel, and you basically build it with the help of none other than Kevin Powell. So yeah, go and check that out if it sounds like it's up your street. This conversation, I actually remembered halfway through that many years ago, well, 2 years ago actually, I wrote an article about UI design fundamentals.
Nice.
Yeah. Based on Gary Simon's short course, which I mentioned earlier, with some examples right here. So you can go and check that out for a quick read. Oh, look at that.
And you know what the awesome thing is? Like, even though this article may be a little bit old, it doesn't matter. Like, it's still relevant. Like, a lot of this designs, and when you talk about like modern design, it is based off of old ideas, and you just kind of refine them. And so, even though this is old, like, still check it out, because it's still going to be relevant. Because some solutions or some questions you have, like about design or development, and you go and Google it, you find a solution that it was like 3 or 4 years old, and it fixes your solution. Like, sometimes, um, like, having a history of this is good, and it kind of builds for the future.
Yeah, totally. So I hope you enjoy that little article. Wow, we are coming up to the hour already, which I can't quite believe. It has been wonderful to talk to you, Shashi. Thank you for coming and sharing all your knowledge. It has been very enlightening. Yes, brilliant.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for just allowing me to share my journey and my knowledge as well with everybody. It's been a blessing.
Yes, it's been lovely. And do you want to tell us just one more time how people can have a portfolio review from you?
Yeah, so every Friday on my Twitter account. Uh-oh, my video just went
Oh,
out.
I can still hear you though, so that's good. There
Here. Um,
we go.
you go. So every Friday, I do Portfolio Review Friday. And so I'll post up a little tweets about it. And then what you can do is just, I'm starting to do a little rules so that it's a little bit fun, right? Like this week I said, post up your link. Tell us about one of your hobbies and if you like pineapple pizza or not. So that way I can kind of get to know you a little bit, and while I review your portfolio. So when you do post it there, I used to do it on Fridays, but it takes a lot of time, so I do it over the weekend. But I still get to them. I still get to all of them, and I'll provide a pastel link with detailed comments on your portfolio itself. And I always tell people, like, you can always come back as much as you want. Like, it's not limited to just one time. Like, I had somebody come back 4 times, and I said, that's great, because I can see the progression this person was making. And I'm like, there's always something new that I find as well. And so, I highly recommend that if you are building a portfolio, if it's not done, if it's done, to have it be reviewed by me or someone else, because this is going to be one of the best ways for you to receive a job. Because once they get past your resume, they want to look at your portfolio. And if it's not pleasing to them, or if it's just it doesn't have the things they're looking for, then you've lost that opportunity. So I want to provide a way for you to not lose that opportunity, for you to get like constructive, honest feedback, so that you can go and make these improvements so that you can land that job.
Lovely. Yeah. So if you're wondering if your portfolio is up to scratch, head over to Shashi on Twitter. He will help you out. Yes, fabulous. Now, I have some exciting news for anyone who has been wondering what happened to the weekly Web Dev Challenge over on Scrimba. Get ready. I feel like this needs some kind of drum roll.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Here it is. Ba-bam! This will be dropping very soon. Yes. Scrimba Challenge weeks are coming to a Scrimba near you. Yes, it's going to be all singing, all dancing. And the first one is Valentine's themed, as you can see here. Yeah. Now, I cannot tell you too much about it just yet, but I can tell you there will be prizes, there will be solutions of the day, there will be a Discord role, there will be all sorts of amazing things. And to hear more about it, just head on over to that link I have hit in the chat and sign yourselves up. Yes, and that will be very exciting to see you all there. Now, on Friday, I'm going to be back again. Tell a friend, because I'm back with Michael. Yes, you may remember, not last Friday, the one before, we were making a rock, paper, scissors game. We got it to work, surprisingly, but it was a bit messy, so we're going to refactor it. Yeah. So come along and see us on Friday. That would be fabulous. Yes, well, that is all we have time for, but thank you very much for coming, Shashi. It has been brilliant, and I hope to see you in one of our Twitter spaces again soon. Always lovely to have you
See you
on
as
there.
well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it was lovely. Thanks for coming, and see everyone next time.
Bye, everybody.
See you.